Once again, if you've just joined, hello and welcome to today's lunch break. I think the room is still filling up, but I think we should get started. Today is the 7th edition of the SASI Lunchbreak. Welcome for everyone who is here. It's great to have you. My name is Annette Ciroli-Harms from the Conpolicy Institute for Consumer Policy. And like in many other past editions of this Lunchbreak, I will guide you through today's session. Today's topic is all about fair trade and how it can be a practical enabler of human rights and environmental due diligence, also known as HREDD. Our speakers will discuss funding opportunities and give practical insights from a coffee project today. But obviously, fair trade applies to many types of crops. So before we get started with the agenda and all the program, I would like to show you a little word cloud in which you can let me know the types of crops that you work with regularly. So the poll should come up now, either as a pop-up window or you should see it in the chat function. So please write in the types of crops you regularly work with. All right, it's starting to fill up. If you've submitted one answer, you can submit multiple answers as well. It should just take a couple of seconds and you can write again. So we see coffee and also Kaffee, the German version of it, cocoa. Some people are working evidently with coffee and cocoa, vanilla, spices, bananas, nuts, tea. Keep answering, keep entering the types of crops that you're working with. It seems like we do have a big cocoa community, but now there's also rubber. Let's see if we can manage to get all the EUDR relevant crops. That's very interesting. Okay, there's more soy is coming in. Brilliant. You can keep answering. We're going to keep this word cloud open for you to answer, but then now let me give you a run through our agenda. As usual, we are going to have opening remarks from the BMZ, the Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation, sorry. Today represented by Larissa Kirfel-Rühle. She's going to come up in a second. After these opening remarks, we have two speakers from fair trade organizations, namely Fairtrade Germany and Forum Fairer Handel, on enabling and promoting human rights and environmental due diligence in a fair trade supply chains. Then there will be time for your questions to these speakers. And afterwards, we have a coffee producer, Caventura, and they speak about their practical experiences with the HREDD fund from a project in Colombia. Afterwards, there will again be time for your questions. And at the very end, the SASI will close us off with an outlook, a summary, and a view towards the next edition of the lunch break happening after a short summer break in September. So now let's take a final look at the word cloud. I think nothing more has changed. We have most people working with cocoa and coffee, but also many other crops present. And now, Larissa Kirfel-Rühle, please, the floor is yours for the opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Annette, and hello everyone to this kind of summer edition of the SASI Lunch Break. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our ministry, and it's a great pleasure to have the welcoming remarks on the 7th SASI Lunch Break now. For those who didn't join so far, just to repeat that every first Friday of the month, our well-established and trusted format presents various practice-oriented tools and guidelines, demonstrating that the implementation of corporate due diligence is feasible for everyone. Human rights and environmental due diligence, HREDD, let's use the abbreviation in the rest of the session, is becoming increasingly important for all actors along global value chains. This is driven by new and upcoming sustainability regulations like the EU Deforestation Regulation, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, CSDDD, the German Lieferkettengesetz, Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, and as well, interestingly, the EU Organic Regulation, which have which has as well some effects. And even if these evolving frameworks are deeply rooted in the development agenda, and of course they are fully in spirit of the SDGs, this is where they come from. They do, however, present considerable challenges, especially for smallholder farmers and producers in our partner countries. So we are in a stage of transition. This doesn't come for free. So we really support this transition. And many of the smallholders depend on access to European markets, but often face structural limitations in complying with the requirements. So I'm so happy that to address these challenges, fair trade principles and standards offer a practical and inclusive model. And they demonstrate that socially just and environmentally responsible supply chains are not only possible, they are already functioning in many places around the world. So it's like a blueprint we can really use to help us to have this really level playing field approaches of the regulations. In this context, we are pleased to introduce a cooperation project between Forum Fairer Handel and Fairtrade Germany, financed by BMZ and supported by GIZ, which aims to strengthen fair supply chains in the face of new legal obligations. A key component of this initiative is the HREDD support fund. The fund supports fair trade businesses and their partners in jointly implementing measures to meet corporate due diligence requirements and frameworks. The goal of this fund is to empower smallholder farmers to transition towards more sustainable production practices. It supports their efforts to adapt to the named regulations, and thus helping to secure long-term market access under fair and sustainable conditions. And we really want to underline as well that it's not only for these cooperatives, but we expect spillover effects to the whole region where the cooperatives are operating. And we are pleased to welcome today the German fair trade organization Forum Fairer Handel and Fairtrade Germany, as well as the coffee company Caventura, who are collaborating with SASI on this important project. Today we'll provide insights into how the fund works in practice and its benefits for both businesses and smallholders. And at BMZ, we believe that lasting impact in global supply chains can only be achieved through strong partnerships. That's why we work closely with a wide range of partners. I'm very excited for today's session and the valuable exchange of insights on this important topic. And lastly, I'd like to thank you in advance for your participation. And very lastly, I would have half an hour to participate. So any questions which are the direction of BMZ, maybe we can take them in the first round of questions. Thanks so much. And back to Annette.
Great, Lisa. And thanks also for your availability to answer more questions. That's really valuable. Okay, so then let's take advantage of Lisa's time and let's move on to our first round of speakers. I would like to ask to the floor Larissa Jung from Fairtrade Germany. She holds a degree in International Development Studies and joined Fairtrade Germany in 2023 as coordinator for international projects and fundraising. I also would like to introduce you to Robert Diendorfer, who will join Larissa for her presentation. He's an expert for business and human rights at Forum Fairer Handel Germany. His work includes political and educational work focused on human rights and environmental due diligence, so HREDD, our abbreviation of the day. Also, he works on fair trade as well as EU regulations, and he's gathered international academic and work experience, for example, in Japan, Nepal, Canada, Germany, and Austria. So please, the floor is yours for your presentation. Presentation should be coming up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm just going to take over the presentation. Yeah, thank you so much, Annette, for the introduction, and welcome also from my side. My name is Robert Diendorfer, as has already been said, and I have, together with Larissa, Jung, the honor, and Jörg, of course, Jörg Meyer, to present you our project, which is PMZ and GIZ financed. And that is revolving, I would say, around one key question, which is how can we enable compliance with EU regulation, and how can we enable HREDD in fair trade supply chains? So we're trying to give you an insight into what we're doing and what the activities are in our project. So first of all, you're going to hear a little bit more about the activities that we're having in the Global North and in the Global South. So this is more of a theoretical input, let's say. And then you will get, in the second part, a more practical insight from Jörg Meyer, who will talk about an EODR project that they are having in Colombia. So let's start right into it. And you probably ask yourself, why is it focused on fair trade supply chains? Because hopefully you all know that fair trade supply chains are usually well known for their high adherence to human rights standards and their fair, let's say, trading standards. But maybe if we take a step back, we unfortunately still have to acknowledge that there are lots of violations happening against human rights and environmental standards in global supply chains, especially in very long and intransparent supply chains. And we believe that fair trade as a concept and as a movement can really work as one solution for a social and future-proven form of trade. And maybe for those of you who are not totally familiar with fair trade principles, I'm just going to give you kind of some examples what we're talking about here. So when we talk about fair trade principles, we really think about collaborative approaches. For example, as you will also hear in the project from Caventura, we also think about very strong relationships between producers and buyers with lots of communication. We also think about the payment of fair wages, and obviously the most important one, to very high standards when it comes to human rights and environmental standards. So we do believe that fair trade can really act as a blueprint in order to implement HREDD and in order to comply with EU regulation. And within our project, we really have, I would say, three main pillars that our activities are focused on. And the first one is what we call capacity building in the Global North. And capacity building really means that we're trying to, with our activities, to increase knowledge about HREDD. We're also trying to increase awareness about HREDD and how it can help in complying with EU regulation. So that is kind of the stuff that's happening in the Global North. I will get into more detail a little bit later on. The second main pillar is focused on activities in the Global South. This includes mainly also capacity building in the form of workshops and trainings, for example, on HREDD and on EU compliance. So that's kind of the second pillar. And lastly, we also not only have, let's say, educational or information spreading activities, but also financial support. And this is mainly in the form of the HREDD support fund that you will also hear a bit more about later on. And the HREDD support fund is really intended to give, as I said, financial support for smallholders and for cooperatives in the Global South. Yeah, and all these three pillars combined really, or the goal of these three pillars really is to kind of form a comprehensive package to implement and to talk about and to raise awareness for HREDD and to implement it obviously as well. And some insights into the activities that are happening in the Global North when we talk about the so-called capacity building, so that you can get a bit of an idea of what we're doing here. Capacity building really means we're trying to increase knowledge and the awareness for sustainability regulation in general and for HREDD practices. So this happens through a lot of different formats. For example, we're trying to spread information and advice with to people who are engaged with fair trade and who are engaged with HREDD activities. For example, in webinars, with fact sheets, with mailing lists, and so on. Yeah, we're really trying to also get in contact and to discuss with German fair trade companies, with fair trade advisors, with ministries and the interested public about HREDD and the importance also of sustainability regulation. Another important thing is, as I said before, awareness raising. So we're trying to raise awareness in the global north for the importance of HREDD and for the importance of adhering to human rights standards and environmental due diligence standards. This mainly happens through, of course, lots of communication work in the form of blog posts, news posts, and also social media posts. We're also trying to contextualize political developments that are happening in the EU level and also on the national level. For example, when it comes to the EUDR or the CSDDD or the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. Other important aspect is that we're obviously not only trying to advise or give advice to people who are affected directly or operatively with fair trade, but also to those people who are in charge and who have the power to change legislation when it comes to supply chain acts, for example, the CSDDD or the LKSG in Germany. So we're also have advocacy activities with national and European policymakers to also influence them and show them the importance of fair trade policies on the one hand, but also HREDD as a general concept on the other hand. And one last thing that is also happening in the form of this capacity building in the global north is that we're also trying to participate in exchange formats with public and private stakeholders. And in these formats, we're really focused on giving the perspective of smallholders and also communicating the challenges of smallholders that they are facing when they have to implement EU regulation. So that's kind of the stuff that's happening in the global north. And just for you to get a bit of an idea, here you can see some impressions. As I said before, the formats are very different. They include keynotes, they include discussion formats with policymakers, with civil society organizations, and so on. So there's really a lot of variety in order to really create to really spread the knowledge well in different kind of spheres and to different stakeholders. That's kind of the main goal of these activities. So that's kind of the global north perspective. And then, as I said before, the second pillar is focused on also activities in the global south. And when we look at these activities, we can see that they are very much making use of the fair trade system and the fair trade network. As you all know, Fairtrade, the labeling organization, as you can also see in the bottom right, you probably know the label from lots of products in the supermarkets. Fairtrade has a very big and broad network all over the world, and they're very, very well intertwined with smallholders and with cooperatives. So we're using this network and the fair trade producer organizations to also build capacity in the global south and in the fair trade producer organizations. And as I said before, this mainly works through workshops on HREDD and on EU regulation, and also with the so-called trainer of trainings approach. So which means that selected members of the cooperative are trained and then they can spread their knowledge accordingly. And the main goal here really is to also gather feedback from smallholders and also to get an idea of the challenges that are associated with implementing HREDD and with implementing EU policies, so that we can really feed them back to policymakers in Germany and also in the European Union to make the regulation more effective and to raise the voice also for smallholders and their opinions and problems. And that happens on the one hand through workshops and through trainings, and on the other hand, as I said before, through financial support with the HREDD support fund. And again, just to get a bit of practical insight, here you can see some impressions from the workshops that are happening in the global south in the Fairtrade system. And yeah, that's kind of a sum up of the capacity building activities that are happening in the global north. And for the third pillar, which is the HREDD support fund, I would like to hand it over to my colleague Larissa, who's working at Fairtrade, and she will give you a bit of more insights into the HREDD support fund and how we provide financial support as well. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, hello everyone. Also a warm welcome from my side. As I was already introduced, my name is Larissa Jung and I work at Fairtrade Germany, especially on the HREDD support fund. I will just take over the presentation. Yeah, as Robert mentioned, or everyone in the previously mentioned, we have all those new EU regulations, and our producer partners are really overwhelmed with all the new things that are raining upon them and all the challenges they are facing in implementing those new EU regulations. And this is why we had the idea to initiate the HREDD support fund. So what is the HREDD support fund? It is a joint initiative, as already mentioned, by Fairtrade Germany and Forum Fairer Handel. It is financed by BMZ and supported by GSZ. And the main aim of this fund is to enable Fairtrade partner companies and producer groups to jointly implement HREDD activities in their supply chains. So the main goal is to support smallholder farmers in making their productions sustainable and adapting it to all the new regulations that have been mentioned before, like EODR, CSDDD, or the new EU organic regulation, and thereby mitigating against the risk of losing market access. The idea behind this fund is really a joint implementation of projects and activities, measures that will help to be compliant with EU regulations, that will help to tackle any HREDD related issues in the shared supply chain. And this is why only consortia can apply to our fund, and the consortia has to be made up of at least one commercial partner and one producer partner in order to really have this shared responsibility approach that is important to due diligence. Commercial partners have to come from European Union countries, also including Swiss and UK companies, and preference will be given to small and medium-sized enterprises. All of those partners, commercial partners as producer partners alike, have to be certified, licensed, or registered under Fairtrade or another fair trade control or certification scheme that is recognized by Forum Fairer Handel. And for the producer partners, we have a priority list of countries where they should come from. We have several countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. You can see them listed here. But applications from other OECD DAC countries may be possible. If applications with producer partners from other countries are planned, we would kindly ask that you approach us beforehand. And it's also important to notice that the final decision if this country is eligible will be taken by BMZ. So what does our fund offer? What funding conditions do we offer? Our fund is a public-private matching fund. Contribution from the consortia partner of at least 25% is expected. This own contribution can be either cash or in kind. And it's also important that all consortia partners contribute, and especially a substantial contribution from the commercial partner is expected. Our fund will then contribute between 2,500 and up to 50,000 euros. So the maximum funding is 50,000 euros. If project budgets should be much bigger than that, the own contribution might be higher than 25%. We aim at funding projects that are quite short-term implementation, so maximum duration of 12 months. And we have several eligible products, and many of those products were mentioned in the word cloud that we did at the beginning. I think almost all of them. We have coffee, cocoa, banana, tea, cotton, but also spices, palm oil, natural rubber, sugar, nuts, and soy. So if you want to get some funding for an HREDD related project from our fund, how can you apply? Application consists of mainly 2 steps. First, we have the submission of a concept note, which is really just a general outline of the project idea, the members of the consortia, etc. And this concept note will be assessed by a working group. This working group consists of members from Fairtrade Germany, from Fairer Handel, and also our producer networks in the Global South. After assessment of the concept note, applicants will get feedback, and if the concept note was well thought of, they will get invited to submit a full proposal, which will contain more detailed project outlines and budgets. And the final decision, if a project gets approved or not, is taken by the steering committee, and the steering committee has also GIZ and BMZ members in it. This year we had already 2 funding rounds. We're in the middle of the 2nd funding round, but we still have a 3rd funding round in September with a deadline for submission of concept notes on September 15th. So if anyone is still interested in applying this year, this is still possible, but we are also hoping to soon publish more rounds for 2026. And just to give you a little overview of what has happened so far in the HREDD Support Fund, it started in 2024. And last year we did approve 10 projects in total, which will reach up to more than 102,000 producers and a total project volume of more than 515,000 euros. Those projects, interestingly, maybe to mention, 9 out of those 10 projects are targeting EUDR regulation in coffee supply chains. So last year it was really visible that EUDR compliance was priority number 1. And those projects are implemented in the following countries: 4 countries on the African continent and 7 countries in Central and Southern America. If you want more information on our fund, you can visit our website. You can find all the templates necessary for your application, and you can also consult the fund's terms and conditions to get more information on all the eligibility criteria. We really tried to design this fund as a funding opportunity for smaller organizations, small producer organizations, smaller companies. This is why we have those small project budgets, the small own contribution, and the short implementation period, because we really wanted to lower the barrier of entry or the barrier to get funding for those smaller organizations who often lack the means to apply for much bigger funding opportunities, such as the GIZ Due Diligence Fund, for example. And that is it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and we're happy to get any questions you might have.
Yes, thank you so much, Larissa and Robert. Yes, indeed, in the audience, you can ask your questions via the chat function to both speakers. And now it is past, so probably Lisa Kirfel-Rühle from the BMZ is gone. But here come the first questions. How can you explain that none of the projects funded through the HREDD fund are in West Africa, although West African countries were amongst the top priority countries?
Yeah, West Africa are priority countries, that is true, but I can tell you that this year's funding rounds has received applications from West African producer countries, but mainly It might also be due to problems in establishing contact between the consortia partners. This is a big barrier for some producer organizations, I guess. Interest and need in West Africa is high, but as we have this consortia approach, of course, the producer partners need a commercial partner in order to apply. And it seems that last year there maybe also the information was not spread enough, and that's why we didn't get any applications. But as I said, this year we have already West African applications.
Great. Keep posting your questions. Otherwise, I will jump in with my own questions. Oh, and Lisa is also still around. So if there are questions to the BMZ, feel free to also address them to Lisa. You've mentioned that the HREDD fund is there for companies that are already associated with your fair trade standards. And we've had other lunch breaks on the fact that obviously being certified as fair trade traders brings you sort of part way towards fulfilling your due diligence obligations as part of the EUDR or the supply chain acts like LKSG or CSDDD. So how do you go further with the HREDD fund than just sort of certifying companies as a fair trader? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, the HREDD fund, as you say, goes beyond fair trade certification because it's a collaboration, a direct collaboration between the commercial partner and their producer partner. So this is really a really good opportunity to implement this joint due diligence approach. As mentioned in my presentation, you have to develop and implement the project jointly. We're really fostering thereby the shared understanding and shared responsibility of risks and problems you might encounter in the supply chain. And as we have heard from our producer networks, many producers right now feel left alone with the tasks and the costs of implementing HREDD. So our fund aims at supporting them not only financially, but also to be an incentive for supply chain partners to get together and start working jointly on their due diligence.
And could you just give,
sorry.
There was now a question. Can you give an example, like one or two examples of which types of projects have received financed in the selected countries?
Yes. As I mentioned, most projects were tackling EUDR, so activities were really basic, like geolocation mapping, getting polygon data of the farms, trainings on what is EUDR and why do we have to comply with that. But our fund really goes beyond. We have a broad understanding of HREDD, you could say. So anything related to the steps of the HREDD cycle, which is identify, address and remediate, track and communicate, would be an eligible activity. Activities could include foundational work, stakeholder dialogues or risk identification, setting up a grievance mechanism, but it could also be really a concrete environmental or social activity such as like geolocation mapping I mentioned, but also implement steps towards agroforestry systems or convert to organic agriculture or activities to diversify incomes or attain more gender equality, for example.
Fantastic. I think that gives a really good overview. Robert, is there anything you would like to add?
Not really, to be honest. I think Larissa gave a pretty good overview of what's happening or what was happening in the previous projects, and maybe to support what she said, the philosophy of the fund or let's say our approach with the fund is that we're really trying to focus on smaller projects and also on the needs and on the challenges of smallholders. And as you all know, they have very different challenges or other challenges than larger companies or larger businesses or operators. So the initial idea was to reduce this barrier to entry, kind of, with these lower funding limits, let's say, and also with the other adjusted parameters that are very much focused on smaller producers. So and yeah, Larissa has already said or already told you about the examples, and I can again only stress what she said, and also again maybe point towards the fact that EU regulation has lots of impacts in the global south, especially the EUDR, and it's really required to support accordingly. Otherwise, yeah, it wouldn't be fair to stay in the fair trade vocabulary, let's say. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for these insights. You two will be back for our final Q&A session after the next input, to which I would like to move over to now. So keep posting your questions, and I would now like to introduce you to our next speaker, the coffee enthusiast Jörg Meyer from Caventura. Jörg is an industrial engineer with an MBA and 14 years of, let's say, colorful experience from Amazon. So even though in the past he has focused more on tech and appliances rather than agri-products, he nevertheless has lots of experience regarding compliance and sustainability questions to be handled there. And he's now an investor and advisor to Caventura. So Jörg, we look very much forward to your presentation that we are pulling up right now for you.
Perfect. Thanks for the introduction. So I have the pleasure today to represent Caventura, the company Caventura. As mentioned, I'm a small investor and help with the project design and application. This project is a collaboration of two parties, as it must be for the HREDD fund. And it is mainly about the compliance with the EUDR regulation. So let's jump to the first slide. Who are the project partners? HREDD Ecosierra in Colombia is located in the Sierra Nevada in the north of Colombia, Santa Marta region. It is almost 25 years old, and it works according to sustainability, conservation, empowerment values. It produces around 800 tons of coffee, and most importantly, 350 smallholder families represent the cooperative. 80% of the export of what HREDD Ecosierra produces goes to the European Union. Caventura is a small specialty organic coffee importer and roaster in Berlin. And it is a sourcing partner of HREDD Ecosierra since more than 5 years, basically since my friend and founder, Jörg, created the company. It's an interesting story. He was traveling through Colombia, working at a coffee farm, HREDD Ecosierra, and then came up with this, the business, launched it, and ever since they have been partners. It's a trustful collaboration, and almost 80% of what Caventura imports and sells here in Germany or Europe is from HREDD Ecosierra. If we jump to the next slide, please. The main objective and the project implementation. So I just read out this one-line summary: create and strengthen a sustainable deforestation-free coffee supply chain with digitalized traceability for EUDR compliance, and obviously keeping the market access for the small-scale farmers involved. The project, it rests on two pillars. One is direct support for the farmers, and the second pillar is basically how to strengthen the central capabilities of HREDD Ecosierra. So pillar one, it is about the direct farmer support. This is mainly how to be compliant, delivering trainings to the farmer community. What is EUDR? Why does it matter? What's the intention of it? And giving them technical assistance so that they can be able to comply. A key point, as mentioned before in the presentations of Larissa and Robert, was the geolocation mapping, farm level mapping. That is a part of the project, but also conservation work directly on the field together with farmers, putting things into practice: agroforestry, soil conservation, fertilizers. I think that is component that makes the project special, that it tries to combine both the technical compliance for EUDR combined with an approach to training, to leadership workshops for women and youth, and on the ground field work, joint conservation work. The Pillar 2 is intended to support the central capabilities of HREDD Ecosierra, and that is a set of activities. Mainly, HREDD Ecosierra is hiring one EUDR compliance officer, a person that is funded by the project for 6 months, that has the job to coordinate, to bring specialized knowledge and support the cooperative on its way to compliance. This person will get a permanent position at HREDD Ecosierra after the 6 months, but is right now completely dedicated to this. Then it is about software solutions, software licenses, technical equipment to help with the compliance. And it also includes a greenhouse gas emissions tracking tool that HREDD Ecosierra centrally builds to support both the central work and the farmers in how to reduce their footprint. Next slide, please. So why is this funding so critical for HREDD Ecosierra? Well, one, as mentioned, the small-scale farmers, they completely depend on the European market. As 80% of their exports go to the EU, they have to find a way to stay or to build compliance and stay compliant. It is their source of income. Then there's obviously a capacity gap that we are trying to close with this project. The farmers, the majority now, as most of the trainings have already happened, we even have hard data on it, were unfamiliar with EUDR and what it means, what the regulation wants from them, and what it takes to be compliant. And obviously, there's a lack of technical infrastructure and also a lack of central expertise to run the project and build a way to compliance. So HREDD Ecosierra and also Caventura, obviously, were very grateful for the chance of receiving this funding. It allows HREDD Ecosierra to do much more than pure bare bones compliance. It allows them to train farmers, to really explain and convince them, to get their support, and additional things like conservation work directly in the field and or women youth training. So the total project value is 123,000 euros, 50,000 of which come from the HREDD fund, and the rest, 69, is or the rest of the money comes a combination of Ecosierra and Caventura project support. Next slide, please. A quick overview of where we are and the status and the timeline of the project. The project started in January. It has a duration of 9 months, so we're now about midterm. So a little update on May, what has happened. The compliance officer is recruited. 251 farmers have received training in 12 workshops, 12 regions, in-person sessions, and also a few online sessions for the ones that were harder to reach. And 90% of the geolocation data has now been collected within HREDD Ecosierra. A few interesting numbers from these workshops. Almost 60% of the local farmers had not heard of EUDR before the training. Nevertheless, the vast majority were familiar with the intention to protect forests and to avoid deforestation, and even not knowing EUDR said that this is one of their aims. And after the training, all of them, 100% explained that they, or confirmed that the training was helpful. They understand now the intention and support both the regulation and the central, the project work of Ecosera centrally on its way to compliance. You see a screenshot of the little survey function they used on mobile to collect these numbers. So what are the next steps? Youth and women leadership workshops. Ecosera has youth and women committees where they support and help these two groups on their way to becoming, well, to taking up leadership positions in the cooperative. These trainings have been delayed a bit because of harvesting seasons, but this is the next step that is going to happen. Then the greenhouse gas emissions tracking tool is being built, not finalized, but being built. Geodata collection, I hear that this is 90% of the farms have been done, so the rest needs to be completed. And the conservation work, they covered already 150 of the 200 fields in target, so 3/4. So this will also be finalized over the next month. And then obviously the project is being looked at, and we have to obviously create the midterm and final reportings about the project success and how we tend, or how we run versus the KPIs that we promised or achieved to reach. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much also, Jörg, for your inputs. I think this really brought to life what this HREDD fund can do sort of on the ground and how it sort of lived. I would like to ask our two other speakers back on the stage. Larissa and Robert, please join us. And in the audience, once again, we do have time for questions to all our speakers, so don't be shy, because otherwise you have to just listen to my questions. And I'm a very curious person, so I will bombard you all with questions. So maybe starting from this training approach, which is a big part of the HREDD fund. So I don't know, maybe this question first goes to Robert. It's often said that, yes, the biggest challenge, and I think, Jörg, you clearly showed it with your numbers, most smallholders lack awareness of the types of regulations we're passing in the EU, what they're doing. They often feel it's a burden and they don't interpret it as something that in the long run should help them. But the train your trainer approach sounds quite promising. Do you have evidence of how well it works also on other scales? I mean, Jörg showed that it has sort of reached all of the farmers that were trained, but how does it live on beyond the initial impact of just a single session? Do you have any evidence on that?
Oh, Larissa, you can also go ahead if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, Robert, maybe I join in, as I'm in more contact with our producer networks who are actually doing this training of trainers approach. And Robert is more doing the advocacy and capacity building in the global north. Yeah, you're completely right. Awareness is, of course, a challenge, but I also want to point out that I think an equally big or even bigger challenge is also capacity in terms of financial capacity for EUDI or EU compliance, EU regulation compliance. But yeah, our Fairtrade producer networks have a very good experience with the training of trainers approach. As we already explained, it's conducting trainings with selected members of POs. So they become then local trainers, and this benefits because they, this way we have the knowledge like localized, and we do not depend on external experts or continued trainings, because the selected trainers can cascade and localize or domesticate the technical knowledge they acquired and apply it to their local language, their local context and culture with tangible examples or practical solutions. And with this approach, the knowledge is retained much better within the POs or the producer organizations, and promotes long-term sustainability and local ownership of this knowledge, even when the project is over. And this is very important in thematic areas such as HREDD, where compliance is it needs to be understood. Those compliance requirements need to be understood locally in order to be implemented over time.
Okay, and now we have a question that sort of goes back to really the role of fair trade and the EUDR compliance. There's a question in the chat that says, except from geolocation mapping, could you please provide some examples of evidence that fair trade certification can actually provide to the competent authorities for compliance with EUDR for certified companies? For example, regarding the legality of property rights or the absence of human rights violations? That's question 1. More importantly, on which criteria does certification have the greatest difficulty providing effective evidence? And how have your funded projects help generate such evidence? Is there anything one of you can say to that?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I can say that, of course, certification schemes, Fairtrade as any other certification scheme, can only support in compliance with regulations, as it also recognized by BAFA, for example. It can be an important tool to help companies fulfill their due diligence obligations, but being a member of such a standard can, of course, not serve as the sole measure of HREDD. Companies themselves need to assign internal responsibility for HREDD. They need to build their own policies and commitment, analyze their supply chains, etc. But for those much more detailed aspects of your questions, I can take this to our HREDD expert, which is unfortunately not able to attend today. And I could provide a much more detailed answer to all those sub-questions you are having later on, if that's okay for you.
Absolutely. Feel free to get in touch with our speakers also beyond the session. I also do remember, because I was able to host it, there was a session on fair trade and sort of in general on how standards and certificates can help with your due diligence. But sort of there we really discussed 1 hour just around how they're not a full substitute for the compliance, but they can get you sort of very far along the way. So that might also be a session worth looking at. I don't know if someone from the technical assistance in the background can look up the link and maybe post it. That might be helpful. Then there's also a question, do you know how your HREDD fund compares to the SASI due diligence fund? Is it smaller or otherwise similar? Do you know this? Otherwise, we can also post that question to SASI directly.
Yeah, maybe post it to SASI, but I think funding amounts are much bigger at SASI and own contribution requirements. But yeah, maybe SASI.
I also got the answer that due diligence fund does not focus on fair trade. So it's sort of broader in that respect. Yeah. And probably, as you said, the funding volumes are quite different. Now, another question has come through. How is the HREDD process implementation different from audits of any certifications, as at times certification schemes cover these topics?
Robert, do you want to jump in, or should I take this one?
I'm not sure if I understood it correctly. But honestly, I would if you have something to say, I would give it to you, Larissa. But I'm struggling, I think, to get the grasp of it.
I mean, audits of certification schemes, of course, often they cover topics that are HREDD related, but I would say, I mean, I guess you're referring to the whole due diligence process. And as stated in all the regulations, this due diligence process should be a joint approach of supply chain actors. And of course, if you just have a certification scheme and the auditor comes and checks it, this is not enough to comply with this shared responsibility and really stakeholder and rights holder dialogue within your supply chain. So I guess this goes beyond what certification can provide. As mentioned from Annette during also another long discussion, it was provided that certification can help to a certain extent, but it cannot. It is not possible to just have certification and then you don't have to do the due diligence work yourself. Let's say it like that. I don't know, Robert, if you want to add something.
No, I think that's very well said. Yeah.
right, then I think there are for now no further question. I think we've addressed all of the questions up to now. So I think it is now time for me to thank you all for your valuable contributions. Also to Jörg, I think it was very, very insightful to see how it plays out really on the ground, and also give more precise information of what it means, what you can do with the smaller fund, but yet how far you can reach nevertheless. So good luck with your future work. Thank you very much for being here. And I would now like to invite Moritz Heldmann from the SASI up onto the stage with his summary and outlook. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Annette, and thanks above all to Larissa Jung, Robert Diendorfer, and Jörg Meyer for your valuable input today. It was really interesting to learn how the challenges posed by new sustainability regulations such as EUDR, CSDDD, LKSG, or the EU organic regulation can be effectively addressed through practical and inclusive approaches. And in particular, we gained quite a deep understanding on how fair trade principles and the HREDD support fund empower smallholder farmers and business to meet complex legal requirements and secure sustainable and fair market access. So this session, I think, has clearly shown that strong partnerships and targeted support are really key to building green, fair, and inclusive supply chains. So also on behalf of the SASI team, I would like to extend my thanks to all the speakers today and also to the participants for their valuable contributions and questions. And yeah, for any further questions and information, please reach out to our SASI anytime via our website, our LinkedIn, or sign up to our monthly newsletter to be informed about any events, studies, and also the funding opportunities that we offer for more sustainability in your supply chains. So last but not least, I would also like to invite you to our next SASI lunch break, which will take place on Friday, September 5th. And we will be sharing the topic of this lunch break after a short summer break via our usual communication channels. So thank you a lot to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you all back in September. Have a nice weekend.